Today's video is a difficult one. It involves the heartbreaking story of a 5-year-old little boy whose life was tragically cut short because of the actions of a selfish, disgusting monster. We will get into all of the horrific details, including the many failures of the very system put in place to protect children from these monsters. There were so many chances to help Eli and maybe even save his life, but he was repeatedly failed by every adult in his life, leaving him to suffer the painful, devastating consequences. This is the story of Elijah Lewis. Elijah Lewis, who family called Eli, was born on January 7, 2016 to Danielle Daphne and Timothy Lewis in Arizona. Those who knew and loved Eli described him as such a great little boy. He was rambunctious, smart, and funny. He was excited all of the time. No matter the situation, he always had a positive attitude and was ready for whatever adventures awaited him. Now, about a year after he was born, his parents got a divorce and went their separate ways. At the time of the divorce, Danielle and Timothy shared legal custody of Eli, though no formal visitation schedule was ever set. That same year, in 2017, Danielle moved to New Hampshire while Eli stayed with his father in Arizona. For the few years that followed, Timothy took care of his son while Danielle lived her life out in New Hampshire. However, by around February of 2020, Danielle started expressing interest in trying to rekindle her relationship with her son. For the months that followed, Timothy slowly started allowing Eli to talk to his mom on the phone and do video chats with her. Things seemed to be going well, and Eli seemed really excited to have a relationship with his mother. By that summer, Danielle asked if Eli could visit her in New Hampshire. She said that Eli could stay with her for a month. Given that it's such a far distance, it only made sense for it to be a long visit. Now, I do want to note that Danielle did have a history of alcohol and drug abuse, so really, Eli shouldn't have been going over to her for that long. But given that things had been going so well with these calls and Danielle seemed to be doing a lot better for herself, Timothy ended up agreeing. But before the agreement was finalized, Timothy told Danielle about some of the problems that Eli had been experiencing at home. It seemed that Eli had some developmental delays and behavioral issues. I want to note that it's thought that he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, so that could be a huge contributor to his behavioral problems. Since he was just a little toddler, Eli was known to cry excessively, withdraw himself when he became upset, and would even pinch himself. He had been seeing an occupational therapist, a behavioral therapist, and a developmental pediatrician, all to help Eli with his developmental disabilities and teach him healthy coping mechanisms. This didn't seem to faze Danielle, though, who was just excited to finally have her little boy with her. She wanted a chance to raise him despite the issues he was having at home. So, by the end of May in 2020, Timothy brought Eli to New Hampshire to spend the month with his mom. From there, Timothy and Eli spoke weekly via video chats every Wednesday. By the time those 30 days were coming to an end, by late June, Timothy and Danielle started discussing what to do next. Danielle told Timothy that Eli was doing really well there. He was on a strict schedule, which seemed to really be helping his behavioral issues. She also knew of some really good doctors in New Hampshire who could evaluate Eli and further provide additional support. Based on this, Timothy agreed that Eli could stay with her for the remainder of the summer. It seemed to be what was best for him at that time. After this, the strict communication schedule did fall off a bit, but it didn't concern Timothy too much because by August of that year, Danielle only had positive things to say about her time with Eli. He was doing so well with her, and he really wanted to start school in New Hampshire. Timothy cautiously agreed, saying that he could start school there as long as they maintain their strict weekly schedule of video chats. But by September of 2020, we get our first glimpse into how things were really going, and by that time, things were starting to go downhill. By that point, Eli had been living with Danielle and her then boyfriend, Joseph Staff, along with his younger sibling in a home with Joseph's mother. By that point, Danielle expressed that she and Joseph were no longer able to manage Eli's emotional and behavioral issues. It got to the point that she asked Timothy if Eli could return to Arizona with him. At that time, Timothy couldn't afford the trip to New Hampshire to get Eli and bring him back, and I guess Danielle couldn't afford the trip either. Basically, because of the behavioral issues that Eli had, he wasn't allowed to go on the plane by himself. He was also very young, so they would have had to purchase 2 round-trip tickets to and from Arizona, and they just couldn't afford that at that time. So Timothy said that eventually, yes, they can return Eli to him, but for the time being, maybe they should try and get Eli into specialized treatment to help him cope with his behaviors. After this first complaint, for the weeks that followed, Danielle continued calling Timothy to ask that Eli return to Arizona. By September 28th, Danielle told him that she wanted Eli out now and that if he didn't take him, she would call the courts in Arizona to get them to hand custody over to him because she no longer wanted him. By October, Danielle said that Eli was causing a tremendous amount of stress to her mental health and to her relationship with Joseph. Over the past few months, Danielle reported that Eli had extreme behavioral outbursts. She said that Eli had stabbed himself with a thumbtack. He stood on their dog and peed on him. He hid a knife under his mattress. He threatened to kill his mom and sibling by stabbing them. He started scratching paint off the walls and started pooping in their grocery bags. She said that Eli is pure evil and that he is no longer welcome in their home. She said that she didn't know how to deal with Eli. He was ruining the house, ruining her relationship with Joseph. He was taking away all of the attention from his younger sibling because they were so focused on trying to get his behaviors under control, and he was ruining their mental health. She said she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Throughout this time, Timothy tried discussing various ways they could get Eli psychiatric help rather than just shipping him away. For those of you who don't know, or I guess have just never thought about it this way, many children in general, but especially those who have developmental disabilities, their behaviors will only get worse if they're thrown off their schedule or if they're put through a sudden life change. It seems that after moving in with his mother, his life changed so drastically that he started to act out. He was no longer getting the therapies he was getting in Arizona, and now his life was completely different. Rather than abruptly changing his life again, it seemed that the best thing for him was to stay in the home, develop a healthy routine and a strict schedule, and start back up with the intensive psychiatric help that he so desperately needed. But after making the suggestion and trying to work with Danielle to get her help for Eli, Danielle suddenly just cut off communication with Timothy. Their last call was on October 26, 2020. After several days of complete silence from Danielle, Timothy called the Department of Child, Youth, and Family Services in New Hampshire requesting a welfare check for Eli. This prompted DCYF to open an investigation where social workers were informed of everything I've told you up to this point. Based on this information, they found several risk factors associated with Eli's situation. His mother, Danielle, had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, hence him being born with fetal alcohol syndrome. She had ADHD, depression, and anger issues. She was said to have a mental impairment that could have affected her ability to care for a high-needs child. During the weeks that followed this assessment, Danielle said that Eli's behaviors were just getting worse and worse. He was defecating all over the house. He was threatening his siblings, and he was hurting himself and peeing himself every single day and demanded that his mom change him and clean the sheets on his bed, basically saying that he was doing all of this on purpose to make her life harder. Then by around midnight on November 22nd, 2020, Danielle took Eli to the hospital where doctors found that he had a black eye and was underweight. Danielle told staff that the black eye was caused by Eli rubbing urine in his own eye, but they didn't think this story lined up with his presentation. Hospital staff also noted a small bruise on his right arm and cheek. Danielle said, though, that Eli was constantly harming himself by punching, kicking, or even choking himself. As she spoke, staff noticed that Danielle was fidgety and nervous. She was stuttering and fumbling over her words. At this point, hospital staff really didn't know what to make of the situation. After holding Eli for an overnight evaluation, he was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. But the psychiatrist found that then 4-year-old Eli was not old enough yet, nor did he have the appropriate diagnosis to be approved for an inpatient care. By around 1 a.m. on November 23rd, he was discharged home with the recommendation that he get outpatient mental health services. Now, due to the condition he was in at the hospital, staff did make a referral once again to DCYF, who suggested that Danielle get him mental health help as soon as possible. They agreed that as long as she did this, Eli could go home with Danielle. I want to note that Timothy was never informed of Eli's hospitalization. By the end of November, DCYF contacted Timothy to continue discussing next steps for Eli. At that time, Timothy expressed that he no longer wanted Eli to return to him because he was concerned for his own children. He had remarried at that point and had young children in his home, and he was concerned for their safety if Eli had lived with them. He emphasized once again that Eli will continue to get worse until Danielle puts him in some sort of therapy program. By December, Danielle told DCYF and Timothy that her sister Tracy in California had agreed to take guardianship over Eli. She told DCYF over the course of the following weeks that the process was going through and that soon Eli would be in California under Tracy's care. It seemed, based on reports, that DCYF basically just took Danielle's word for this. All throughout this time, they never did any at-home visits, only phone visits where they would speak to Eli briefly and Danielle. They never followed up with Tracy to see if she truly was taking guardianship over Eli because, spoiler alert, Danielle never followed through with any of it. We would later find out that Tracy did agree to take Eli, but Danielle never actually went through with the paperwork to make it happen. So she was saying all this time that she desperately wanted Eli out of the home, yet when she had the opportunity, she didn't take it. They also never followed up to make sure that Eli was placed in therapy because he never was placed in therapy. Despite Danielle's desperate pleas with DCYF and Timothy for Eli to get out of their house, despite these claims that he was causing all of these problems, at no point did Danielle ever actually take Eli to receive mental health help. She was doing nothing to help his behaviors or help him in general. And frankly, neither was DCYF. They weren't actually doing any home visits or following up to make sure that Elijah was getting the help he needed. Instead, DCYF basically just told Timothy and Danielle to figure something out among themselves and assumed that his mental health would be taken care of. Now, I do want to note that I know it was 2020. I'm sure it was very difficult to get Timothy in anywhere for mental health help. But first of all, they should have never pulled him out of the mental health help he was already getting, because by February, they should have known that things were closing down and that it would be difficult to continue his mental health care if he moved to New Hampshire. Because again, it's much easier to continue therapy you're already getting than to start a new case. I'm, again, sure it was difficult to get him in, but I'm sure there was telehealth options or other options, and maybe they were limited. But if they had just gone and put in the work to get him seen by someone, I'm sure they could have figured something out. But they didn't. By September of 2020, Danielle apparently told DCYF that Eli's behaviors were actually starting to get better. All of a sudden, he was acting sweet and was behaving at home. She said that she no longer needed him out of the house and was no longer concerned for her ability to care for him. That same month, DCYF closed Eli's case, finding that Eli would be fine as long as he attended regular therapy. At that time, DCYF determined that any claims of neglect or abuse of Eli were unfounded. From there, no further follow-ups were done, and they never checked to see if, he was actually in therapy or if he was doing okay. His case was closed, and they washed their hands of him. For the 9 months that followed, not much was known about Eli's experience in the home with his mother. She no longer made any reports to DCYF, and she cut off all contact with Timothy. According to Timothy, he tried numerous times to get into contact with her all throughout 2021, but she cut him off completely. It wasn't until October of 2021 that anyone outside of that home would hear anything about Eli or the rest of the family. By October 7th of that year, Danielle actually gave birth to another baby in the home where she lived with Joseph and his mother, Joanne. According to later reporting, Joseph and Danielle announced the birth of their baby to his mother by texting her, "Mom, it's a boy. We did it upstairs in your bathroom. No mess at all, except the towels." However, instead of welcoming their baby boy into their home, by October 10th, Joseph and Danielle dropped the baby off at the Catholic Medical Center under the Safe Haven law. Basically, in New Hampshire, parents can surrender a child up to 7 days old at a hospital, fire station, or police station without fear of prosecution. I do think that this was the best thing that they could have done for this baby because clearly they were not competent parents and they shouldn't have another baby in the home. So I guess that's the one good thing they did in this entire case. However, when medical staff examined this baby, they found that he was born addicted to drugs. So yes, they couldn't be prosecuted for abandoning their child because it was within the safe haven law. They did the right thing by dropping it off at a medical center, but you can't be doing drugs when you're pregnant. This led the staff that found the baby to call DCYF, who started another investigation into Danielle. When DCYF agents went to her home, they noticed that Eli wasn't there. When they asked about this, Danielle first said that she no longer had custody of Eli. He was with her sister, Tracy, in California. But when DCYF workers interviewed Joanne about his whereabouts, she said that the last time she saw Eli was about a month ago. She was under the impression that he was sent to a behavioral health hospital for treatment. Of course, this prompted DCYF to follow up with Danielle, who then changed her story. She now said that Eli was actually with her brother, Bruce, in Texas. Officers then called Bruce, who confirmed that Eli was safely in his care in Texas. But something about how he spoke really rubbed officers the wrong way, so they asked for proof that he had Eli, which of course he couldn't provide. He later then admitted that Danielle asked him to lie for her and tell them that Eli was with him. When officers then called Tracy to follow up with her, she also admitted that Danielle asked her to lie about having custody of Eli, which she said she refused to do. That is probably why Danielle changed her story to Bruce, who initially did agree to lie for her. Tracy went on to say once again that she did agree to care for Eli. She would have taken him to live with her in California. But Danielle never followed through with it, telling her that DCYF wouldn't allow it, which again, we know isn't true because DCYF literally did not care who had custody of Eli. After being unable to locate Eli, police were able to obtain search warrants to search the home and cell phones belonging to Joanne, Joseph, and Danielle. First, officers executed their search warrant on the home. There, in a spare bedroom in the upper level of the residence, officers found a tan blanket which had red and brown stains all over it. It was found on the floor next to a washer and dryer. Then, in the main bedroom, located on the bottom floor of the home, they found red and brown stains all over that mattress. Of course, these stains are thought to be blood. They also found methadone in that home, along with 2 plastic baggies containing a brown powder substance thought to be heroin or fentanyl. In the garbage can of the home, they found a trash bag full of clothes thought to belong to Eli. They also noted that there were no photos of Eli anywhere in the home, even though there were photos of the rest of the family. They couldn't find any of his toys or anything else that indicated he ever lived in that home. Danielle worked hard not only to get rid of the evidence of what happened to Eli, but she wanted to erase any memory of his existence from her home. After the search of the home, they went through Joanne, Joseph's, and Danielle's cell phone. There, they found numerous text and Facebook messages between Danielle and Joseph where they discussed their growing disdain for Eli. They discussed starving him and beating him, with Danielle often referring to Eli as maggot. In April of 2021, Joseph texted Danielle calling Eli a piece of shit, saying that he can't stand him. That same month, they talk about how Eli asked Danielle to stop starving him, that he's hungry and needs food, and that starving him isn't nice. And Joseph said that the boys got some balls to talk back like that. By late May, Joseph started raising concerns over how skinny Eli is starting to look, saying that they need to clean him up and feed him more to fatten him up before family comes to visit. These types of messages continue well into August, with them going back and forth, Joseph telling Danielle that they need to start feeding him, yet they're still both saying that they absolutely cannot stand him. Throughout that time, there were also images found on their phones which detailed some of the more physical punishments that they doled out on Eli. Most of them were done by Danielle, while some were done by Joseph, though with all of the punishments, Joseph stood right by. These punishments, including piercing his face with a knitting needle, stabbing his face with a broken coat hanger, and beating him with a shower rod. There were pictures of a severe wound on Eli's back, which they had left untreated, so the wound was becoming infected and necrotic. They picked him up and threw him, causing him to sustain a black eye. As Eli's physical condition continued to deteriorate by late August, Joseph texted Danielle saying, maybe let him sleep and feed him, continuing, no more you know what to him. He needs to look good so we can go out. But Danielle replies saying, this effing kid deserves nothing. By September 7th, she texted Joseph saying, just whooped the maggot's ass. Then a photo taken on September 11th, 2021 shows Eli looking extremely malnourished with cuts on his forehead and face, with swollen eyes and a deformed nose. Clearly, he had been beaten very badly, and Danielle was taking photos to relish in how bad he looked. They texted about how Eli could no longer walk or even sit up on his own because he was so weak after being starved for so long. Around that time, Joseph told Danielle that Eli was in enough pain, they've done enough, they needed to stop torturing him. But Danielle just replied by saying how much she hated Eli. Of course, these text messages are extremely distressing and heartbreaking to read. It was clear that Danielle hated her son with a burning passion, and rather than getting him the mental health help that he desperately needed, she took out her anger on him by torturing him and starving him. By early October of 2021, officers then found messages between Danielle and Joanne where she asks Joanne not to mention Eli. Joseph texted his mom saying that there is an emergency, that they're going to be questioned, but urged her to say that they all live upstairs and don't have access to the downstairs because it's being remodeled. He also told her not to mention Eli. At that point, it seemed like Joanne may have been under the impression that Eli was still alive, though she clearly didn't know where he was. She told Danielle and Joseph that they needed to get off of those hard drugs, needed to get back to work, and needed to get a place of their own. Joseph said that he understands. After hearing what they found in the home, with that blood on that mattress in the main bedroom, we now know why they wanted to make it seem like they never went downstairs, because that seemed to be where Eli may have been beaten because, again, of the blood found in that room. Either way, after these messages, police then found messages between Joseph and Danielle from October 14th, 2021, where Danielle was texting Joseph to hurry up. These messages were sent from an area in Massachusetts, and based on those messages, investigators extrapolated that Joseph was most likely burying Eli's body while Danielle texted him from the car, telling him to hurry up. Based on this, officers went to the area where those texts were sent from, which was a state park in Abington, Massachusetts. Officers set out in the area to search for Eli, and by October 24th, 2021, his remains were discovered buried in a shallow grave. By that point, both Joseph and Danielle had been arrested and charged in connection to Eli's death. After the horrific discovery of Eli's body and the arrests, Joseph sat down with investigators to tell them exactly how Eli spent his last moments. According to later reports, all of the abuse Eli suffered in his final months culminated in one final beating, which took place on September 21st, 2021. That day, Danielle beat Eli so severely in the bathtub that he went unconscious. According to Joseph, he found Eli lying in the tub, naked, covered in blood, and surrounded by broken tiles. Joseph chose in that moment not to seek medical care for Eli. Instead, he put a Band-Aid on one of his many wounds and placed him in his bed. At some point between that day and September 24th, he died. But because of the fact that they just left him in his room after this beating, they don't know the exact day that he actually passed away. After discovering his dead body in his bed, Danielle told Joseph to hide the body, so he did just that. They placed his body in a container, which they kept in the home for a few weeks. After that, they took the body to a state park in Abington, Massachusetts, where they buried him in a shallow grave. After his body was discovered by investigators, of course, he was sent to the medical examiner for an autopsy. By November of 2021, the ME released their report, which detailed even further how horrifically Eli had been treated. They found that Eli had been severely underweight at the time of his death. At the time of his death, he was 5 years old, standing at 3 feet tall, weighing only 19 pounds. That is less than half the average weight for a boy his age, which is around 40 pounds. They also found numerous wounds to his face and scalp, as well as pressure ulcers all over his body. Then a toxicology screen came back as showing that Eli had fentanyl in his system. His cause of death was determined to be the result of violence and neglect, as well as malnourishment and acute fentanyl intoxication.
I hate him. I hate him.
Texts like this highlight the hatred Danielle Dauphiné had for her 5-year-old son, prosecutors say. Once he moved in with his mother at age 4, prosecutors say the boy was beaten, developed ulcers, lost 13 pounds, and his ability to sit up or stay awake, as Dauphiné sent texts like this to her boyfriend.
He's a rotten kid. Inside and out.
When Elijah died of the abuse in September 2021, the couple left his body in the basement for 3 weeks until they buried it in an Abington state park.
After this report came out, Danielle was ultimately indicted by a grand jury on charges of first and second-degree murder. Meanwhile, Joseph was indicted for manslaughter, second-degree assault, and falsifying physical evidence in relation to hiding his body. By September of 2021, Joseph actually pleaded guilty to his charges, and by 2022, he was sentenced to 22 to 45 years in prison for his role in little Eli's death.
I just wanted to say, I never wanted any of this to happen to Elijah. I wish I could go back and change everything. I wish I seek help. Elijah deserves to be loved. He deserves to be loved. He deserved the medical attention that he needed. He didn't deserve to go through that. And I wish I could have done something to save him. I love that boy, I do. I'm so sorry to everybody that has to deal with this. It's so traumatizing, and I'm so sorry, I truly am. I wish I could take it back. Thank you, Mr. Staff. You may be seated.
Initially, Danielle pleaded not guilty to her charges and spent the following 3 years behind bars awaiting her trial. But of course, we know that a jury is not going to be kind to a mother who has proven to do such horrific things to her own son. So by September of 2024, Danielle actually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. by doing this, she admitted that she knew exactly what she was doing when she was beating and starving him. She knowingly and willingly caused his death and did so in a violent, horrific way. After her plea, Danielle was then sentenced to 50 years behind bars for the murder.
Upon your plea of guilty to the crime of second-degree murder, knowingly, you are sentenced as follows. You are sentenced to the New Hampshire State Prison for not more than life nor less than 50 years. There is added to the minimum sentence a disciplinary period equal to 150 days for each year of the minimum term of your sentence to be prorated for any part of the year.
Of course, after the discovery of Eli's body and finding out the horrific things that were done to him, his father, Timothy, was absolutely devastated. He said that he tried so hard to get back custody of Eli and said that he never turned him down coming back to Arizona. But I do want to say that from what I gathered as an unbiased third party reading the factual information, I say unbiased as I don't have any skin in the game. I don't have any reason to believe one side over the other. Based on what I read, I do believe that Timothy told Danielle that he couldn't take Eli back because he too was concerned over his behaviors. If he was as violent and out of control as Danielle was saying, then his own children were also at risk. But with that being said, I do think that he tried to get him mental health help. I do think he tried to get him into a behavioral treatment center to try and address the issues, just as he had when he was living with him in Arizona. I think after Danielle realized that Timothy wasn't just going to take Eli back with no strings attached, getting rid of the problem completely, she decided to take her frustration out on Eli. Instead of getting him the help he desperately needed, she pretended that everything was fine. No more DCYF calls, no more calls to Timothy. She kept him in her home so that she could torture him and take out all her hatred on him. As we can see from texts, even Joseph was becoming concerned with his condition, not necessarily because he felt bad or thought that they needed to stop abusing this poor child, but because he recognized how bad it looked. Yet, Danielle hated Eli so much that she just couldn't stop herself from beating and torturing him, knowing that if anyone came to visit, they would see how bad of condition he was in, knowing that they couldn't take him anywhere and that maybe questions would start coming out based on how he looked. She didn't care about any of that because of how much she hated him. Nothing else mattered besides making him feel the pain and torture she inflicted on him. And in the end, she beat him to death. I do think she also gave him the fentanyl probably more than once, maybe to make him sleep for hours so that she could get a break from him, maybe to try and calm his behaviors, or because she just wanted to further torture him. Everything she did to that young boy was to make his life as miserable as she could, and I truly believe that.
I tried countless times. Obviously, it was the holidays, so I tried over and over and over again throughout the holiday season and beyond.
Eli was reported missing in October of 2021. His remains were found later that month, buried in a park in Massachusetts. An autopsy showed he died of violence and neglect. Dauphinée pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and other charges connected to Eli's death and was sentenced last week to more than 50 years in prison.
Justice in the form of the legal system can only go so far. And there's never justice for something like this.
Lewis says he is grateful for law enforcement who worked to solve Eli's case and for the community's support during this difficult time.
He is a great little boy. He's funny, smart. He was very excited all the time. A lot of the time, and he should be here right now. He should be here, 8 years old, playing, going on adventures, complaining about homework.
Yes, he had behavioral issues, and if we're going to believe Danielle, he did seem to be out of control. I do believe that she probably hit a boiling point and was very frustrated with him at one point. But at the same time, she refused to get him the professional help he needed. She refused to actually get him into regular therapy. I think that when she realized that he couldn't just be institutionalized, that she was going to continue to have to work with him, she just completely gave up. And again, instead of getting this little boy what he needed to get his behaviors under control so that he could live a healthy, normal life, she resorted to torturing him and abusing him because of how much she hated him and because she wanted revenge, probably. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, because of the fact that DCYF missed so many opportunities to step in, basically letting the abuse continue and doing nothing to help with Eli's issues, Timothy sued them. In a 50-page wrongful death lawsuit, he alleges that DCYF did not do their due diligence in protecting Eli, basically ignoring their duties to step in when they were called so many times.
Why didn't they remove that child from that situation?
Family members learned for the first time Thursday that New Hampshire's Child Protective Services was involved multiple times in Eli's life. In October 2020, when his dad filed a concern. Again in November 2020, when doctors noticed bruises. But DCYF closed the case when the boy's mother lied and told them she sent Eli to live in California with his aunt.
How do you close the case? When you know that there's a child being hurt, why don't you continue to look for that child?
DCYF got involved again a year later, which ultimately led to the discovery of Elijah's body.
How many more children in the state need to die before we follow through on what's actually happening in the homes and just taking the word from the parents that are being accused of these things? They're not doing enough, and that needs to change.
Now, as of right now, all I know is that there was a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, but I haven't seen if any further movement has been made. The last I heard about the lawsuit was from October of 2024, so if you know more about that side of the case, please do let us know down below. But with that being said, that is all the information I have on today's case. I know this was a very difficult and horrific case to hear, but I feel that cases like Eli's are so important to share. There are so many children like him who have a difficult time growing up, who have disabilities such as fetal alcohol syndrome that cause him to experience emotional and cognitive difficulties that come out as negative behaviors. He needed therapy, which he was getting in Arizona. But once his life was uprooted and all those therapies suddenly stopped, his behaviors got worse, probably because he didn't know how to cope. He needed therapy. He needed help, but he was denied that. And that is what led to his worsening behaviors. He wasn't just a bad kid who needed to be physically punished to get his behaviors to stop. He was a child with needs that were not being met. And at the end of the day, this happened because of Danielle and Joseph, because of their violence, because of their negligence, and because of their, frankly, immaturity. But that is where I'm going to end this video. I could rant on this forever because of how horrific it all is. But if there's one thing that I want you guys to take away from this video, it's that when you see a child with disabilities, even if they don't have visible disabilities, like, autism, sometimes you can't even tell if someone has autism, fetal alcohol syndrome, things like that. Just know that when you see a child acting out, or if it's your own child that is acting out, it's not because they want to be bad. It's not because they want to torture their own parents. It's not because, they just want to be a bad kid. Most kids don't want to be bad kids. They're either doing it for attention because something is wrong in that department, or because they have a cognitive or emotional disability or some sort of issue going on inside that they just do not know how to cope with. And if they are experiencing or exhibiting these behaviors, they need help. They need professional help, especially if it gets to the level that Eli was at. So if there's anything you take away from this video, just know that children don't want to be bad. They don't act out on purpose, per se. Chances are they need help. So if you have a child like that in your life, or if you know someone with a child like that, please be patient with them. And again, if it's your own child, try to get them the help they need, because chances are it's going to help and it's going to make your life a lot easier. So that is all I want you to take away from this video, if you take away anything. But you all heard what I thought about all of this, and now I want to hear from you guys. Do you think Timothy could have done more to prevent this? Do you think DCYF should have stepped in more, and why do you think they didn't? And what do you think of each individual's involvement in little Eli's death? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn the notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Spotify. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.